Hello, welcome. Well, my name is Gabrielle Resch McNally, and I am the director of the Women for the Land program here at American Farmland Trust. I want to thank all of you from wherever you are for joining our free range conversation. It's part of a series that we do, and so stay in touch with us if you want to hear other wonderful conversations on this platform. As you should know, this is a live conversation and you will have a chance to engage and ask questions via social media. So when you comment on whatever platform you're joining us with, we'll be able to see that and hopefully engage with your comments and with your questions. Today, I'm honored and privileged to be working with our Veteran Women for the Land program in partnership with our Pacific Northwest Regional Office. I want to thank our whole team here at AFT and our project partners, some of whom you're about to meet, for their support in helping us get to this stage. I really want to emphasize that my role here today is really a facilitator of dialogue. I'm not an expert in all things related to women, veterans, and agriculture. I'm not a veteran or a farmer, so I come to this work with a great deal of humility. I'm really excited to be joined here today by Tanisha Renee, who's an Air Force veteran and an entrepreneur from the Pacific Northwest. And she's currently our awesome intern with the Veteran Women for the Land program, also based here in the Northwest. I also want to welcome Kim Pham, who's the Veteran Conservation Corps Manager for Washington Department of Veterans Affairs, also a veteran and a project partner of ours, based in Washington State. And then, of course, Tegan Moran, who is with Oregon State University Small Farms, a coordinator working in extension, and she's based in the Willamette Valley here in Oregon, a core collaborator with women in ag and veterans in agriculture work at Oregon State University Extension. So in a minute, I'm going to give each of them a chance to properly introduce themselves. But before I do that, I just wanted to set a little more context for today's conversation. So veteran women bring a unique skill set and for many, a direct need for healing and connection to the field of agriculture. Many public and private institutions have not served this audience adequately in the past, particularly as it relates to helping them realize their farming goals. It is our hope that this conversation will help us collectively better understand and engage with women veterans in the agricultural community, both at the local and to national scales. While the work that we're sharing with you here today is regional in scope, we believe that it will resonate beyond the Northwest, and we appreciate any of you who are joining from other places in the country. We're excited for you all to join the conversation as we humbly engage in dialogue on how to better serve women veterans in agriculture. I wanted to share just a highlight, a kind of few big takeaways that we learned about women veterans in agriculture while doing a regional needs assessment during this past year. We had the privilege of working with 23 women veterans and veteran service providers to better understand what women veterans involved in agriculture need to support their success. So I just wanted to highlight a couple core findings that will kind of provide scaffolding to our conversation here today. But you all will certainly be shared a link if you want to delve into that report in more depth. So the first main point that we raised in our needs assessment is that veteran women farmers are a diverse group. Just that as we know that women farmers are not a monolithic group, we know too that veteran women involved in agriculture have different motivations from growing food and they face different challenges. Many are motivated to engage in agriculture because the profession offers a chance to connect to the land, provide healing for the self and for others, and create more resilience in the face of uncertain times. The second core takeaway is that intersectional and layered barriers exist for veteran women in agriculture. So many of them are beginning farmers that are looking to navigate challenges of things like land access, while others that we spoke to are facing gender discrimination, and many are wary of public institutions who they may feel have betrayed them or let them down in their return to civilian lives. And finally, our third kind of core point is that outreach to veterans and women veterans in particular require carefully curated spaces for education and networking. And finding and appealing to women veterans in agriculture is a challenge, but many of them who we've spoken to and want to speak to see a value in connecting with other women and are eager for connections and resources that are curated for them. So it's a lot to digest, but with that, I really want to pivot to my guests, and I'll be asking a few questions and then hopefully getting to the questions that are coming from all of you. So just a reminder, this is a live stream. Please feel free to post your comments in whatever social media platform you're joining us with, and we'll do our best to respond to those now, or certainly in the future if we don't get them to get to them here in our conversation. So I want to get started. I think I'll pass the question first to Kim, but I'm going to invite each of my guests here to share a little bit more. So I'd like you to introduce yourself, share a little bit about your military service, if applicable, and then how that and other experiences really launched you on your current personal and/or professional path, since many of us are wearing multiple hats here today. So go for it, Kim.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to be here to talk about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm a Navy veteran, and one of the things I think that I got the most out of my service is the desire to continue to serve for the rest of my life in some capacity or the other. And when I transitioned from the military, I came across a pretty common challenge of, okay, what do I do now? Because for me, just like a lot of folks, I didn't necessarily want to do in the civilian world and what I did in the military world, what I was trained for in the military. And so I came out thinking, okay, so how do I serve? And for me, I was reminded quite a bit in my transition, looking back into my service. Uh, During all the times that were challenging, nature was myself. My just it it was my place to go to. It was a cure-all essentially for me, and so in thinking about service, I really wanted to do something to give back to the land, give back to the waters, and really at the end of the day, give back to the communities that reside on those lands and waters. And so I found myself um, interning with the Veterans Conservation Corps program with the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. And now I manage the program, and I am striving to serve veterans in providing them opportunities to connect with the lands, waters, and communities in Washington State.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Kim. Go ahead, Tanisha.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. And as Gabrielle said, I'm an intern with Women for the Land, helping find resources for veteran women that are in agriculture or want to be in agriculture in the Pacific Northwest. If I didn't already say that, I am also a disabled veteran and an aspiring farmer myself. So I joined the military, and I really have to start at the beginning of my story, where I just grew up with a lot of housing instability and food insecurity. I'm the oldest of four. By the age of 20, I'd had custody of all of my mother's children, and I just really felt like I needed to break some cycles just in our family of poverty, which is usually generational, domestic violence, and drug use. So, like many inner city kids, without a lot of opportunities and options, I decided to join the military by the time I was 21. I was fighting the war on plaque as a dental assistant in the Air Force. My first base was in Germany, and I really had a good experience for the most part. I found everything I was looking for: discipline, security, stability, and above all, camaraderie, which was very great. But like most women, I did not walk away from the military without some sort of trauma. During my time, I was sexually assaulted, and it caused me to even get out early. It really, really affected my ability to work in the civilian world. So working with men is really challenging for me. Being in closed spaces can be really hard. And like Kim said, I did not want to be a dental assistant. It was fun while I did it, but it was not my greatest goal in life. So in that time from leaving the military, I've had to file bankruptcy twice. I've been divorced twice. One of those relationships, I experienced domestic violence. And I always say that while COVID is and was extremely unfortunate, the pause that I needed to just discover who I am and what I wanted to do with my life came at the perfect time. what I found is I like creating things and I like working with my hands. So I really got into gardening and doing some woodworking, and I feel like wanting to own my own farm is going to bring a sense of peace. I definitely feel like the process of healing starts in nature, and that definitely starts with healthy nutrition, which a lot of us don't learn or don't even get. Growing up, I rarely had fresh vegetables and fruits in my house. Everything that I find in gardens now can be like, oh, I've never had this. This is great. I'm 40 years old. So that is a reality for most of us. I found that I want to make beautiful things and see people on their happiest days in life. So my goal is to own a farm and do some orchids or lilies, just flowers, and build those beautiful things and have weddings. I always strive to be healthy, happy, and functioning, because that can be a struggle for me at times. And I think sharing people's happiest memories will be really good for me. I've found that being out in nature, just feel the open spaces and the freedom to be on your land and to have something that's yours. So a small homestead is kind of what I think, but really providing beautiful things in nature and sharing happiest moments with people. And that's what brought me here.
Thank you so much, Tanisha and Kim, for sharing. One thing I just want to stress, and I say over and over again in my role, is that farming is deeply personal. And, that's part of the challenge that we encounter as we all navigate our farming paths. So thank you for having me here as well. My name is Tegan Moran, and I am a woman farmer. I am not a veteran. And I work for Oregon State University Extension Services with the Small Farms Program. And the Small Farms Program really aims to see our small to mid-scale farms succeed. And that success includes the human, the individual farmer, to see a business thrive if it is a commercial operation. And we work with both commercial operations and land stewards alike. And we do, three main things. We explore what's possible, and that's both with individuals on their individual land, as well as within our farming landscape in Oregon and in the Northwest. We help to solve challenges, whether that be on the land or overcome barriers. And there are a lot of barriers to entering into farming. And we'll talk about some of those today as well. And the work that I am most proud of and that is so meaningful to me is that we connect farmers and ranchers with one another. And so what brought me to this work with veterans is really stepping further into our farmer network establishment. So we help to facilitate farmer networks. We have women farmer networks that have been running for a very long time across the state. And they were established out of a recognized need that women farmers have unique experiences. They face unique obstacles. There's a lot of discrimination to overcome. And within that, we also have military veteran farmer networks, recognizing that military veterans come into farming with their own unique set of challenges and opportunities. And so really facilitating farmer to farmer relationship building, community, and Tanisha, I love how you said camaraderie. I mean, we know that the way that we can really support farmers are by connecting with one another, to learn from each other, to share resources, to provide support, whether that be, directly on the farm or most often emotionally with our mental and physical well-being. And so I care very personally about the success of our farming community and come into this space wanting to connect people to one another and build relationships. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for sharing that and just for giving us such a beautiful glimpse into your personal and professional work. This is so just lovely to be in conversation with you all. I just want to remind folks that we are live streaming this conversation. So if you're joining us on a social media platform, you can ask us questions, you can comment. I do see some loves and likes and whatnot, but I would love to, we'll do our best to get to your questions here shortly. I want to sort of, take the facilitator's privilege and ask another question of our group here. You each highlighted a little bit of sort of the challenges and barriers might exist for women in agriculture and women veterans in agriculture. Much of the report that we developed, many of those may not be directly some of them directly tied to people's experience as women, to their experience as veterans, to their experience as folks who are from other historically underserved groups, or folks who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, all of these intersecting sort of identities that we bring to our work everywhere. So I would just love to kind of ask you all, could you reflect on what do you see as those core barriers that tie back to our ability to support both women veterans, and I'll just add kind of veteran families more broadly?
I will say that the biggest barrier that I find, particularly in Oregon, is land access and money for that land. It's really hard to find anything in the city. And when you're going out further, there's just people with more money, or even finding access to that money. Like I said, I'm a disabled veteran. I live on a fixed income. It is going to be really challenging for me to find a bank or a loan or something of that nature that's like, oh yeah, here's some money for farming. So that is one of the biggest barriers that I see.
Yeah, on my end, there are the set of challenges that happen with regard to starting in agriculture, but then, really at the end of the day, it's the initial set of challenges of transitioning from the military that I think often gets overlooked, not just by the veteran, or excuse me, not just by those around the veteran, but sometimes by the veteran themselves, not realizing the impact that their service has had on them. And, we get praised and seen for our positive attributes of service, without being asked, where did those positive attributes come from and what else comes with those? How did we forge, the ability to work hard, the ability to persevere, our resilience, all these things, and thinking about, how those negative experiences may have impacted us. And I think, a lot of folks don't realize that coming out of the military, you don't just lose a paycheck. It's not as easy as, what skills did you learn in the military and how do you use these skills outside in the real world? Most of us don't get to choose what we do in the military. So we've acquired a set of skills that may not be meaningful to us when we come out to the civilian world. It'll still be useful. But I think that, acknowledging the fact that transition is a lot more complex. You don't just lose a paycheck, you lose an entire support network, right? And so, I think that's really the first challenges, is the challenges of transition.
Yeah, thank you both. And I just want to expand a little bit what Tanisha said around the land access piece and financing. There are some pretty strict rules in place for a lot of traditional lenders around farming experience required to qualify for loans for, agricultural farm businesses or land programs. And really there is a gap and a disconnect between what opportunities veterans coming out of the service have and to gain that experience. And so often that experience is not, their military experience isn't necessarily recognized in a way that can translate. And so there's really a cost and time implication in terms of not only receiving the training to be successful on farm, but to receive the financial support and the funding to be able to access land. And then just building off of what Kim shared, what I'm seeing in the ag sphere is that there are military veteran support services, and they look very different depending on where you are. And so there's not really consistency. And then there's ag support services, but they're not necessarily communicating, and there's not necessarily, a real strong connection to make sure that the gaps are filled. And so it's why I'm really excited about this project that American Farmland Trust is hosting, and that there's an increased effort for collaboration so that we can address some of those gaps and really overcome some of the barriers that I think may be policy related or otherwise. And, I think that as we see more cohesion and more consistency in services, we're going to be able to see more impact.
Awesome. Thank you. And I just want to, again, remind folks that you're welcome to post comments. I see folks posting their name and their locations, where their background is. I already see people sharing that they want to connect with each other and talk more about opportunities. One of the things that we know through Women for the Land is just how important networking is, and a lot of the opportunities that we create for coming together. We'll be planning in the next couple of years here in the Northwest a series of events to gather women, veterans, and some other women in agriculture to share, to learn, to network, to potentially mentor. But we found just how incredibly valuable that is. The camaraderie, as Tanisha said, build that again in civilian life, but also in the agricultural community. And my experience working more broadly in the agricultural world, just how important those networks are for people's, not just their financial and kind of business success, but how needed they are for mental health and for supporting each other through, agriculture is not for the lighthearted. There are a lot of challenges, as you all have mentioned, and a lot of work to sustain a successful farm business. I'd love to kind of, just pick your all's mind a little bit. And I'll be transitioning to, again, feel free to share questions as folks as they come to you in the platforms that you're on. But I thought I would just kind of ask you all if you could highlight one or two of your favorite resources, not necessarily just for women veterans who are interested in agriculture, but certainly if those arise for you. But as folks who are joining in here, maybe new and beginning farmers or folks who are kind of getting started, where should they be looking for resources as they're getting started? And feel free to share, your local resources or things that are more national.
Well, I can say that Tegan's organization is super, super helpful, a great place to start. Everyone that you talk to in agriculture, I find, is extremely welcoming. They want to help you. They will tell you everything that they know, and they will give you a lot of resources that you might not find anywhere else. I've spent a lot of time looking for resources for women, and even trying to just narrow it down to the Pacific Northwest. There are some schools that you can go to, like Rogue Farm Corps is a really great place if you want to learn how to farm. There's some local farms, just speaking from Portland, Mudbourne, Zinger Farms. You can take a lot of opportunities to go out there to learn how to farm. And as far as business resources, even just some of the local, like Meso, Livelihood Northwest, will help you out as far as like how to structure your business. Now, they might not be able to always give you specific agriculture help. They are going to help you find a way to build your portfolio, to find you all kind of resources that they can to help you be successful in your business. And I'm going to think of some more. I just can't come up off the top of my head. But there are a good amount of resources if you know how to find them, if you know people, and really kind of knowing where to look, which is not always readily available to everybody.
Yeah, I'm a little biased on my end. I work for the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, and we're trying to build a whole statewide network of support for veterans who are interested in agriculture, wherever they are. From whether it's they just wake up and they decide that they might want to try farming, to already having an established small farm and wanting to improve or shift their mission. I think there are a couple key pieces that I think of in terms of support, and especially based on how we're building our network across the state with our community partners. And that's, you know, farm training, so actual, how to do whole farm planning is one aspect. With that, in Washington State, we have a partnership with Washington State University's Extension's Cultivating Success, and they provide free 12-week whole farm planning training for veterans for free. And then if you want to move from the classroom onto working, with hands in the dirt, checking out any incubator farms in your area. We have a few around the state, but even just getting to know your local farmers, I think, is valuable, and connecting and find, meeting them and asking them about their work and how they got to where they are, and even why they got to where they are, I think, is an important question to ask as well. So, that's the hands-on experience part of it. And then if you're interested in, going forward with your own enterprise, for example, your own small farm, figuring out business training opportunities. Here we have a partnership with Enterprise for Equity. And I know that WSU Extension also has an entrepreneurship course as well. Both of those are free to veterans. And that teaches you how to build a successful business plan from scratch, basically. And then from there, finding access to financing. There are a couple of resources around the state for that as well. And then, finding land, probably the key piece, like both of the folks here have said. And, for us, we are very lucky to have a partnership with Washington Farmland Trust. And they, in the last year, have expanded their farm to farmer network, which is, I like to call it kind of like OkCupid for farm seekers and farmland owners who are seeking to either, sell, rent, or lease their land, and then aspiring farmers who are seeking a particular parcel of land to reach their agricultural goals. And so, yeah, those are a few things that I think of when I think about resources, at least in Washington State.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And so it sounds like if you're in Washington, reach out to Kim to figure out how to best connect to those networks for sure. And if you're in Oregon, we have a military veteran farmer listserv. It's a farmer network that you can join through an email list. And, I'll go blue in the face saying that connecting with other farmers is really one of the best things that you can do. And there's several different ways to do it. And I know it can be really intimidating if you are brand new into the ag community. And so that is where kind of seeking out if there's a extension service, small farms program, or what sort of, smaller scale farm support organizations are out there that you can connect with and kind of attend events to find a space that feels good. And that's, really what we're all looking at is how do we create spaces that you feel welcome in, that you feel safe to connect with others. And then you can find out about the resources that really work well, because I will also be the first one to say there is a lot out there. It can be really overwhelming. It can be very time consuming in terms of really trying to filter through what's going to apply to you. And so also as a part of this project through American Farmland Trust, a resource list for the Northwest is being put together specifically for veteran resources. And you can also reach out to me if you're in Oregon to find, we're trying to really filter through those for you. I also like to say when you're on your farming path to take one bite at a time, because there's 1,001 decisions that need to be made or resources to tap into. And so just taking one step, finding that, and then as you step into the ag community, I think you'll start to feel that there is a lot of support and encouragement. And, Tanisha can probably speak to her experience as she's been engaging more here in Oregon.
Hold on, okay, I did take it off mute. Perfect. Yes, I will say that every place that I've been, I've done some farm tours. I've done some small farm school. I did go to, I think it was Clackamas Community College, and you're there and they have a lot of presenters, and everyone you meet is in some form of agriculture there. Majority of them are veterans. You can find just connecting with people, the needs that they have. I would say I've had a really good, well-rounded of experiences of being able to go to different kind of farms has been really good. Farms in the city, farms out of the city. I've kind of driven around a good amount of Oregon at this point, getting to some of these places, which is good. I've met a lot of women in agriculture that want to help you in any way that I can. I know I've stressed that a lot, but anybody that you talk to in agriculture really, really wants to help you. I've gained a lot of knowledge as far as resources on where and how to learn how to farm, because that's not something I was ever taught. I grew up in apartments, so we didn't even have a garden. I've found a lot of organizations and coalitions that you can sign up for. They have their own networks that they will connect you with. Like Veteran Farmers Coalition is one place that's a good place to start. And again, I'm blanking out on these, but there are a lot of resources out there to help you learn how to farm, to help you have land access, to help you set up a business plan, to help you connect with other people. Anything you want to do in agriculture, you can call someone. Don't be intimidated. They will welcome the call and they will give you all the knowledge that they know.
Thank you, Tanisha. And yeah, thank you for all those resources. I know if folks' heads are swimming, this is recorded, so you will be able to access this video later, but also you can reach out to us with any of these questions or follow up. Again, this is a live conversation. We welcome your comments and your questions. We will try to get to them. I have a question that I'm going to jump to in just 1 second from Addie. I just wanted to put a pin on a couple national resources that for those of you who are joining outside of the Northwest region, if you're just getting started, it's always a good reminder about the U.S. Department of Agriculture and their Farm Service Agency as a first stop. I encourage you taking a buddy or friends, someone who's navigated the system, but that's where you kind of get started to get your farm ID number and get access to some of those federal resources that can be very, very daunting and intimidating. So I often encourage people to go again with a friend or another farmer who has been successful, but it's just, great to point that out. And just the Department of Ag in general, both at state and federal levels, the Farmer Veteran Coalition as a network nationally, but also a number of state level chapters, and AgriAbility that do a lot of programming around veterans and folks who have other disabilities. Great resource for folks who might be kind of wearing some of those different hats. So just a couple national examples, but most states have, both incubator farms and veteran focused kind of learning farms, or that incubator where you can get started and then transition into your own farm. And again, it helps that pick that line off for federal agencies to say, hey, I have experience. I ran, a small farm at part of this incubator, and now I'm eligible to apply for a loan to purchase my own land. So again, none of this is perfect, but it is a great place to start. So I want to pivot to this question from Addie, who I think so we all know, but and adore, but it's a fantastic question. And what she states here is that, women in agriculture are less likely than their male peers to identify as farmers. Similarly, women who have served in the military are also less likely than their male peers to identify as veterans. Could each of you talk a little bit about what this intersection is and what it might mean for doing this kind of work more broadly? And whoever wants to jump in first.
So that's interesting. I don't identify as a veteran. That's not something I start off with telling people. And I think it's always their kind of like shock. I think that a lot of people have the version of a veteran as a white male, and they get really confused when it's somebody of color or a woman. And they're like, oh yeah, I did this. I guess I look at it as just maybe a part of who I am, but I don't know why I don't express that on a regular basis, but I don't. Maybe it's just as a woman, or I can only speak for myself. You don't always realize all the hats that you're wearing. And when you go to like introduce yourself, you're not saying all of the things. I think we focus on our job more than anything, whatever we're currently doing. But that is very true. I don't normally lead with I'm a veteran.
Yeah, what's interesting is identity is an interesting thing. There's the identity that you perceive yourself as, and then the identity that others perceive you as. And I think potentially, definitely for the veteran world, but I think potentially for the agricultural world too, is that when you see yourself as something that is pretty natural to you, but then another person is questioning that as their first reaction. I think that sort of dissonance is very understated. There's a lot in that dissonance of perception of how you see yourself and what you've done and what your experiences are, and how another person may assume what that identity is. I think it, it leaves room for doubt of yourself. And I think that's a very difficult uh, sort of thing to grapple with. So, like, for example, in the veteran world, no, I feel sheepish, to be quite honest, saying that I'm a veteran, right? Sometimes because, if I were potentially a white male, I think the response would be very different, a bit more warm, a bit more accepting, I think, and less skeptical, maybe. And I think there's something about skepticism that sort of chips away at what you believe in that identity for yourself. And so I would imagine if I were coming from the military and going into the world of agriculture, and I know that the number of women producers are increasing quite a bit in today's during the time today, but it's still the perception of a farmer is a male, right? So there's just these sort of just invisible pools that you have to wade through before you get to the other side of being successful in these realms, I think. Yeah, maybe I'm not articulating that well, but that's kind of what I feel. Yeah.
Kim, I thought you were sharing that very clearly. Thank you. And it's hard to articulate the complexity of identity. And I love this question, Addie. Thank you. This is one of the challenges of our Small Farms program overall, is we're always trying to share the diversity of what farmers can look like, what farming looks like, that you don't necessarily have to be selling product to identify as a farmer. And so there is a constant need for storytelling and for sharing and really reflecting out who we are as this collective group. And, in terms of how this impacts our work, both with that veteran identity as well as that farmer, is, we need to think about how many different doors are there, how many different access points are there, so that people can see themselves in this space. So they can see an event and say, oh, that speaks to me. I can be welcomed there. And so there's not a one size fits all. And that's really part of the challenge, but the beauty of this work. And I think for those of us that are service providers, we need to get out of the rut of, programming that sort of checks three boxes or fits in one lane, and to really think creatively. Also, I think the most important thing is nothing for you without you. And so again, doing this programming where we're trying to really understand what are the needs of women veterans, and and to accept that there will be a lot of different requests, and that we are in a position where we need to provide that. And so how many different doors can we open? How many different spaces can we provide? And again, word of mouth is really, really powerful in relationship building. So the more women veterans we can connect with one another so that they can actually address and talk about this question, the better. And I'll just share one of the best conversations I was a part of in a specifically military veteran workshop series for those going into farming, was around the pros and cons of identifying as a veteran for branding's sake. And it was absolutely amazing to hear how different, depending on where you're located, depending on the community you're in, how some people at farmers markets had a backlash to their veteran identity, how some found a lot of community support for it. And so we have an opportunity to explore those nuances and complexities.
Oh, I just appreciate all of your beautiful reflection on that question. I think it's so complex and nuanced, and I love this idea of storytelling and the need to, again, kind of going back to this needs assessment we put together, that we were reminded that, again, women veterans are a diverse group, and I'm always saying that about women farmers, and farmers themselves are a diverse group, and we still have a lot of tropes, both in the military and in agriculture, which is one of the ways I came to this work, was this nexus of this sort of the man in a field by himself or on a military base. We often reproduce these tropes about who agriculture is for, who the military is for, and I think it's exciting for me to think there's space for so many. And I love this idea of the big tent. And Tegan, one of the things that you said about sort of people who may not be selling produce but still want to or do identify as a farmer, that I think agriculture is a space where a lot of people come to it to make a living, to build a business. But we know it's also been treated as something slightly different in American culture. I think for a lot of good reasons, personally, in my opinion, in terms that families who come to this space, people come to it for healing, to reconnect, to grow food for themselves, for their community, to sell at market. And so to acknowledge that it is not one thing. Again, it's this monolithic, we might have programs that drive a certain kind of agriculture for good and ill, perhaps in certain ways, but that, it's a much broader tent that we could all, find ourselves under. And I think making that case. I do see a question from Wendy that I want to respond to, encouraging folks. We'll be wrapping up here fairly soon, but I just want to, encourage, if you have any other questions or comments. Again, if we don't get to all of your questions, comments, concerns, we've got a record of it, and look forward to connecting with folks now or in the future. So Wendy on LinkedIn, she talked to AFT, American Farmland Trust, a while ago, thinking, there aren't that many programs focused on urban farming and indoor farming. And as we're growing and gaining in popularity, as your words, not mine, but I like to think that's true, are we looking into areas like this, or we're working sort of to address some of those issues? And I'll just say, I think, definitely at American Farmland Trust, I think we're certainly looking more at sort of urban agriculture piece in different pockets. So it is really kind of regionally based. In terms of what kind of opportunities. Other things like aquaculture are more sort of kind of different types of agriculture. It really does kind of depend on where you are. So if you have, I'm not sure, I didn't look to see where you're at, Wendy, but certainly happy to connect you. But I definitely think as we've grown into thinking about needing a more diverse group of folks in agriculture, that being more connected to urban, suburban farms and agriculture that looks different, not the agriculture that's been on my grandpa's farm for generations. Like, as we meet a more diverse group of people who are accessing land in more tenuous ways, or in more creative ways, and more communal ways, we're getting more creative as an organization, and certainly others in this field, to meet people like with needs specific to that. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to the urban farming piece at all, or kind of indoor agriculture, any specific resources any of you have that you could point folks towards.
Yeah, depending on where you're located, I'd be happy to help direct resources. And I know that Extension Services in general has identified urban ag as a priority area for focus. And I think there's a lot happening. It's just figuring out how to plug into it and connect with it. So there's definitely opportunities out there. And I think it takes all. And, I think there's a sense of urgency building as we, during COVID saw our, local and regional food systems stressed, that we really need to build resilient food systems. And that's going to take both urban and rural, and a connection between both. So thank you for that question.
Well, I think I want to kind of pivot to my final reflection question for these wonderful guests. And again, I want to thank everybody who has joined. It looks like we've had a pretty consistent group of people stay for this whole conversation. This video will be available to you to share, so we hope that you do. And again, please reach out to us with questions or comments. We're still learning in this space, and we know it's complicated and challenging, but we want to be, partners. And if you're outside of the region, again, we've done some thinking, and we want this work, our learning, to be shared, because I think a lot of it is not very, the heart of what we're learning and sharing is not only relevant to the Northwest. But what I'd love to kind of ask our guests here is, can you kind of give us, let's end on a hopeful note. I'd love to hear, what is giving you hope right now in terms of your own personal journey or your professional work with supporting women, veterans in agriculture.
What I've been really hopeful for is I firmly believe that most people, we have more in common than we do in differences. And what I mean by that is I've seen a lot of people wanting to get back to nature, a lot of people really wanting to become self-sufficient. I've seen how climate change has been at the forefront of most of our minds and wanting to reverse some of that. I've just seen so many people want to get back to basics and excited about getting into agriculture and excited about sharing that with their communities and finding all these hidden talents that they had and didn't know about when they were going through COVID. And so I'm really hopeful that more people will get into agriculture. I'm really hopeful that more people will create small communities to really care for each other around them. We've seen the strength of many communities, particularly during COVID, having to help each other out, having to feed each other and provide all kinds of support for each other. And I'm very hopeful that more women will have resources and access, whether that be veteran women or just women in general, getting into agriculture. And I've seen a big shift with the way people do look at farmers and the way people do look at veterans. And while I still think that the majority of people think male and think white, that is shifting, and I do see that. So I'm really, really hopeful for the future that more people will get in agriculture, that more people will put climate change at the forefront of their mind, and more people will start to become community centered. So I'm really hopeful for that.
Yeah, I am honestly, I'm hopeful because of this project that you're leading, Gabrielle. I think what I'm most excited about is, especially coming into the next year and planning to hold listening circles with women veterans in agriculture. I'm really excited to know and figure out together what are the meaningful questions to ask women who are wanting to get into agriculture or already in agriculture. And yeah, I think that we have so much to learn, and that in itself is really exciting to me. There's always opportunity in not being an expert, I think. And in fact, I very much revel in not being an expert because I get to really lean on my curiosity and desire to understand how it is that we can best serve women veterans in agriculture. Because from my experience, supporting veterans and women, um, you know, sort of lays the path for supporting everyone else in those communities. And I think that's just my experience of serving veterans. When we serve veterans, we serve everyone around them too. And I'm really looking forward to being better at that.
I just have a couple things to share. I mean, one is that I've had the opportunity to hear very strong stories of how farming, whether that be stewarding land, getting into a farming business, has literally saved lives. I mean, we see that there is a healing component to this work. And I am also really hopeful that what I'm seeing both within farming communities and within farmer support organizations is a transition away from individualism or the sense that we need to do this on our own, and a recognition that, community and collective support is absolutely critical. And I think that shift is occurring. And so that with that, the strengthening of the roots, the strengthening of the connection, and really community-driven, grassroots-driven, powerful change in our food system. And I'm just so excited that due to, an increased emphasis on equity, that, we're seeing that women veterans are going to be a strong part of that. And, I have to say, with more and more women in farming, we're seeing a positive transition.
Oh, I appreciate all of your hopeful thoughts. They really leave me feeling hopeful. And I mean, my hope comes from working with amazing folks like yourselves. And I think, yeah, to that point of Keegan, that I think there is a real reckoning and recognition, both that the crises are real, as you mentioned, Tanisha, about climate change and food insecurity, but also like that our models, there's so much good to pull from what we have done and learned and what agricultural communities, rural spaces, urban spaces are doing. And there is, because I think this resurgence awareness that the demographics are changing. We have this AFT, we're always talking about the sea change of transition happening in the next decade. We're going to have a lot of farmers who are average age is quite elderly. And we have a new generation that's coming on that wants to, and really frankly needs to do things differently. The pathways aren't quite the same, and but there's so much interest and desire. You know, I've always been the odd person out of my family to be in agriculture, and agriculture has increasingly become this space where people see so much potential to reckon with these challenges in our world, but also to build community, to heal, to connect. So it's a really exciting place to be, if not, of course, challenging as well. So just lovely to be a part of the conversation with all of you today, with all of you who joined virtually. Hopefully, for all of those who read and watch this later, watch it later. I'm excited. And please reach out to us if you have questions, comments. One of the things we know is because women and women veterans don't always wear farmer veteran identities on their sleeve, we know reaching them and connecting them and getting them into our programs or getting them resources can be a challenge. So for any of you who've been listening today who have ideas on helping us to do that, either in the Northwest or beyond, let's be thought partners in that way. So again, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Tegan and Kim and Tanisha, for all of your thoughtful perspectives, and just great to be here. So with that, we'll end the broadcast. Take good care, everyone, and we'll see you soon.